Timcast IRL will be live in Miami with Patrick Bet David, Donald Trump Jr., Matt Gaetz, and Luke Rudkowski. Join us there. Get your tickets by clicking the link in the description below or by going to timcast.com. Let's jump into the first story from the New York Times. Right-wing rebels block defense bill again, rebuking McCarthy on spending. It was the second time in a week that hard right Republicans, I love that, I don't know what that means, had defied Speaker Kevin McCarthy on a spending measure, signaling that the GOP was still far from agreement on a bill to fund the government. All right, let's just start from the beginning. We got Matt Gaetz here. Matt, what's happening?
So the government runs out of money at the end of September, and we've known that for a year. And that is the money that was agreed to with Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi as part of the massive omnibus that most conservatives and I think most regular folks opposed. And we made a commitment in January as part of the speaker contest that we would not govern by having one up or down vote on every disparate agency of government through continuing resolutions or omnibus bills. You never get the type of specific review of anything when you do that. So McCarthy agreed to that. Here we are at the end of the month, and we've only passed one of the 12 single subject spending bills. And that's got a lot of people concerned. McCarthy initially said, well, what we really need to do is pass a continuing resolution again, which, this country has been governed by continuing resolution or omnibus since the mid-90s.
I know omnibus is when you pack a bunch of things into one bill and then get someone, but what's a continuing resolution?
A continuing resolution is however things are being funded right now, just fund them the same way next year with increases for, inflation, cost of living. So just keep doing everything the way it's always been done is the definition of a continuing resolution. I do not believe that is a serious and responsible way to govern. And I believe the reason we have a $32 trillion debt is because we have governed this way since the mid-90s. So McCarthy wanted to do that and say, well, that'll just buy us time. We'll just do a continuing resolution for a little bit, but don't worry. After that, we'll really get our single subject spending bills in order. I've heard the same bullshit for 7 years I've been here, and it's always the same rhythm. And so I got a group of conservatives together, and we said we will never vote up or down for every agency of government together ever again. We have to impose discipline on this process where there is programmatic analysis and review and a determination as to what's working and what's not working, and the ability to actually isolate some of the most weaponized programs and excise them from the government budget strategy. This is not just a right-wing idea, to your point. When we were in the speaker contest fighting for this, no less than AOC went on Rachel Maddow and said what the Freedom Caucus, what the conservatives are fighting for here would actually be good for everyone. On the Young Turks, people who loathe me and said they loathed me said, well, if you really think about it, these single subject bills could help us really evaluate our priorities as a nation. Even the New York Times ran an opinion piece. Matt Gaetz is right about McCarthy breaking those commitments. So in Washington, people don't think you have to live up to your promises. They think you could just kind of bullshit your way through, oh, you make a promise, it's a few months later, you ignore it, you engage in some other power trading enterprise. But we got together and said, no, you have to keep your word. We're not voting for these. And then today, we had a little bit of a breakthrough. I just left a closed-door meeting with some of the most moderate members from New York, some of the most conservative members from around the country, and they acknowledged that the votes do not exist to pass a continuing resolution, and they sat down and said, what are the first 4 single-subject spending bills you'd like us to consider?
Wow.
And we said, well, if we're going into a shutdown, let's fund the DOD. And again, our appropriations bill has all the gating to keep money away from the gender reassignment surgeries and the DOD becoming an abortion travel agency and all the stuff that has been really problematic about the DOD. Second, the border. Our Department of Homeland Security funding bill that pays the TSA agents, that pays Customs and Border Patrol, that pays ICE. Third, we want deep cuts to the Department of State and Foreign Ops. We think an easy place to show good faith on deep cuts is foreign aid. because if we're out of money, maybe we should borrow less of it to give it to other countries. And then the final one is the agriculture appropriations bill that we agreed to bring up and debate, because there's so much waste in the food stamps program. There's so much opportunity for savings with basic work requirements, and we think we can have deep cuts there. So if you get all that together, put it up, get it moving in single subject review, I think you can build real momentum. So the House has really abandoned the McCarthy CR strategy today and has embraced the Matt Gaetz strategy of single subject spending bills. And that's not to my credit. That's to the credit of some of the moderates who I think wised up and said, well, if we're going to go into a shutdown, let's at least lay out what our priorities are. And by the way, it is divided government. So on those single subject bills, we're going to have to negotiate with Democrats. And I think, that is the situation the voters have put us in, but at least we can cast a vision by passing our bills and then having, I think, the best posture to negotiate with the Senate and the White House. So I feel more productive today than I did yesterday, when my sole goal was to kill governing by continuing resolution. I think we've got that pretty well buried 6 feet under for now. There's a threat from moderate Republicans to the Gaetz strategy. And it sort of goes like this. Well, if we, here we are at the end of the road, Gaetz wants to spit out all these single subject bills, and we just don't think there's time. Now, whose fault is that? That's the Speaker of the House's fault. That's the Appropriations Chair's fault. By the way, when we were negotiating this bill last night, trying to get together, the Appropriations Chair left to go to a fundraiser. For with lobbyists.
Who is the Appropriations Chair?
Her name is Kay Granger, and she left the meeting where we were going over funding the government because she didn't want to miss scooping up checks from lobbyists.
Is this the first time there's not been an omnibus or a CR in what, decades? Or
yeah, I mean, this is the first
crazy.
time since I think 1997. You can check me on that, but to get that, here's what we have to avoid. So one of the bizarre rules of the House is if you ever have 218 signatures on any piece of legislation, it's do not pass go, do not collect $200. That legislation goes directly to the floor. So all 213 Democrats are willing to sign what's called a clean continuing resolution, which is no changes to the government, keep funding the woke weaponized government. Why wouldn't they? This was the deal that McConnell and Pelosi initially made. They'd continue that forever under those terms. So they've got a clean CR. And what the threat is that five liberal or moderate Republicans could just say, we don't want to do the single subject bills. We don't want to go through the pain of doing the cuts to foreign aid or to food stamps or anything like that. So we're just going to go sign what's called a discharge petition and then just move that thing like shit through a goose.
They absolutely could. And, to those Republicans who would want to take that route, I think that's wonderful. And Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger will be there waiting at the bar afterwards when you retire and never get reelected.
Every Republican who would sign a discharge petition with the Democrats will be signing their own political death warrant and handing it to their executioner, because it'll be the Democrats hunting them and taking them out of office, and every one of them will lose their reelection. Some would lose it in a primary, some would lose it in a general. But the good news is, actually, some of the folks that might otherwise do that, I think, have really bought into my strategy to move single subject individual spending bills.
But it's not even about a strategy. It's about what is right for this country. We've long complained, as long as I've been active in, or as long as I've been an adult dealing with politics, the idea that, what did they bring on, like a wagon with all the 5,000 pages? They wheeled it into Congress or whatever. Like, okay, you're voting on this. You can't read it. Sign it. That's insane.
Well, and what if you want to vote for the veterans programs and against the Department of Education? Like, what if you want to vote for the military but against foreign aid? They never give you that opportunity. So they just come to you, put it all in front of you, and say they threaten you with shutdown politics. And then say, what are you not a member of the team? You want to hurt the economy, or you want to hurt the country? And in the end, it's all just a march to perdition, because we are $32 trillion in debt, running up against $2 trillion annual deficits at a time when the global economy is de-dollarizing.
Yeah, they call it a defense bill that is being that you were pushing back against. Is that it's a defense spending bill? Like, what is it? What else does that entail? Like, how long does it take to debate a single issue if you're taking these single issue bills?
The defense bill has 186 amendments.
That's what, it's not a defense bill. They call it a defense bill
no,
to
it
make
is.
you look bad for going against it.
Well, this
but there's other
particular
stuff
bill,
in there.
this particular bill is just is a single subject defense appropriations bill. But there's amendments to take out the Ukraine money. There's amendments where people want different things to happen with military policy or with mission that relates to their district or their constituents. And by the way, that's what governing looks like. Mowing through those amendments, giving them their 10 minutes of debate each, debating all night if we have to, all morning, and then let the votes fall where they may. I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is a few people in a back room come up with that 5,000-page bill, and you've got, a day or two to figure out whether or not you're pro-government or anti-government. How lazy and nihilistic that is.
So
these people don't want to do work.
That's what I'm wondering. Does it come down to laziness?
So you mentioned one woman goes off to a dinner with lobbyists or whatever.
Yeah,
That's all they care about.
She couldn't be bothered to work with us on what should be the non-defense discretionary number that we have, and how should we consider what amendments should be voted on or not voted on. She left to go to a lobbyist fundraiser.
Well, so let me ask you, what does this mean? What does a government shutdown mean for the average person?
I can tell you what it means in my district. In the Florida Panhandle, it means tens of thousands of people go without a paycheck who keep our country safe, who are the civil servants doing the highest end research. It means that, the weapons that we're testing to ensure that America holds the high ground, that goes on hold. It means that in an era where 61% of people in this country are living paycheck to paycheck, that people will be, deeply uncomfortable if this thing lasts, more than a month. It shouldn't. It shouldn't have to. I think that we are destined for a short shutdown if we can get and that's because our speaker was not doing the work in the spring and in the summer, presenting these bills on the floor for us to work through them over time. But I think that's not a bug of the system. I think it's a feature. I think the whole goal is to set these deadlines where we don't do any work, and then at the end, you centralize power with the donor class and the lobbyists. Because if they give a lot of money, the reason they give that money is to not have individual review of their programs. It's just to get the people they give the money to make sure that their special interest is covered by the legislation.
And if the donors are going to, say, the Speaker of the House, it's a lot easier to centralize your lobbying on a single individual than it is the entirety of Congress.
And you heard all of my colleagues during the speaker contest debase themselves, going to the floor saying Kevin McCarthy is owed the speakership because of how much money he's raised and given us.
That was why? That was the game. That was the primary reason.
Many of my colleagues used that as the centerpiece of their argument as to why we ought to vote for him. I used it as a centerpiece of why we shouldn't vote for him, because maybe we shouldn't vote for someone who's sold shares of themselves.
How would you...
Gentlemen, my idea is, my hope is that the ideas you have and the way you do things, I hope it's winning.
Well, I tell you what, we got the wind at our back, and we didn't have the buy-in that we have today from Republican moderates to go through these bills individually. I think they're coming to realize that is the only way we're going to get through this. And I know this is wonky, but you have a very sophisticated audience, and I got some thoughts to share. I've been out in America, and I know a little bit about the Tim Pool audience. But the circumstance is, if we do single subject spending bills and at the same time have a continuing resolution that we pass, well, then I know what the Senate will do. That swampy institution will just pick up the continuing resolution, negotiate its terms, and forget about all of the individual review of programs. And that is unserious. That is unpatriotic for people who get the opportunity to be on the board of directors of the most powerful country.
I think, I don't know if it's the internet or whatever, the younger generation is more tuned in to a certain degree. The idea that they would cart in 5,000 pages and say, we know you're not going to read it and you can't sign it, or else. Or else your campaign money goes away, right. Or else your committee assignments could be jeopardized. Otherwise, your leadership, your gavel, if you're a chair or a ranking member on a committee, you could lose that. And you got to break it.
And then that's why people go home and say, you know what, I know that we're all bankrupt, we're killing the dollar, we're destroying the American dream, but I had to vote to keep everything open because, our troops and our veterans.
Could you imagine how long the Constitution would be if it was drafted today?
Could
you imagine?
How many lawyers would have been involved with writing it?
The amount of money being spent on it, lobbying for it? Jesus.
Yeah. You had an interesting question before the show that I wanted to wait on, and you said a question about default. Do you want to ask?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot of nuance to any kind of shutdown. No shutdown is the same, right? It all changes. And look, I have a number of issues, but one of my major issues when it comes to default is the faith and credit of the U.S., right? Like the dollar is already under assault. We're having massive issues because of our economic issues, because of inflation. The dollar's been under assault for a long time, certainly under this administration. My great worry is a default. That's something I cannot sit with.
Well, so you asked earlier, I don't want to take the question.
How long will it take? Like, how many days does it take before we say, okay, now we're at the point where we have to start paying our interest rates on our bonds?
Yeah, default, of course, is different than the government running out of money, right? The two things don't align. We're at no risk of default because we have abolished the debt limit. We through the bad debt deal that McCarthy valeted for Democrats into law, through that, there is no limit to the amount of Fed policy that can exist to keep printing money. The problem is that money can't go to deploy to government agencies to run government programs that are deemed non-essential during a shutdown.
But you can increase the debt if the government shut down, technically.
Well, no, there is no limit to the amount of dollars we will pay on interest until January of 2025. That is the feature of the
this is the
inaptly named
the May deal that McCarthy.
No, well, that's a different feature. That's if the 12 spending bills are not passed by March, then we do fund everything exactly the same, except take a 1% haircut starting in March. And McCarthy and the advocates for the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which was fiscally irresponsible, they would say, but that's a cut in spending. We should celebrate that. Now, government spending grew by 40% during COVID. And a lot of that was through entitlement programs because eligibility ballooned. But you can't grow government by 40% and then say that the grandiose win we got was a 1% haircut starting March of 2024.
Also,
I'm sorry.
Oh, opportunity cost. If you stop spending 1% on something that could be making you a 2% return, you're actually losing money. So like just stopping certain expenditures is not necessarily a good profit.
But see, that's a big debate we were having today because I had one member look at me and say, well, Matt, here's really where I can get on board with you. If you just say, across the board, everyone takes, a 7-8% haircut. Everyone gets it. Every program gets it the same. I think that's great. What I don't want to do is have to go in and make value judgments about vertical cuts. Who gets vertical cuts and who doesn't? Because I'm really worried that if we did that, there's some transportation projects in my district that would be deemed a boondoggle or wasteful and might be cut. So it can't be a merit-based analysis. It has to be a uniform reduction.
Wait, what?
Because it's not private sector.
Yeah, he's basically saying there's a strong possibility they're going to find out that we're wasting money. Please don't take our money away.
Well, and so long as everyone's wasteful spending is reduced by an equal amount, and we don't look at logic or reason where my district might do worse.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.